One of the more puzzling questions society has pondered for centuries is the question of life after death. Does our soul survive the body's demise? Does it move on to another dimension? Does it take another form? Or does it simply just cease to exist once we die? Now, so far, no one has been able to answer that question, at least answer it scientifically. But there's a vast number of people who claim they already know the answer, and the answer is yes. They claim to have had first-hand personal experiences with the spirits of those who have already died. And many of those experiences have occurred in this very building, the Waverly Hills Tuberculosis Hospital in Louisville, Kentucky.
The building is haunted. I've seen them for myself. And I don't expect everybody to believe that, because nobody's going to believe it unless they do see it for themselves.
And at first I just thought that I was very poor at chasing people down through the building. But as time went on, I found out that there's no one there. I'm chasing ghosts. And believe me, it'll raise the hair on the back of your neck when you're walking down the hall and you see a ball of light glowing in front of you, or you hear footsteps right beside you and there's no one there.
There have been some past paranormal groups that have come up here, done investigations in this building, and had things thrown at them, had voices saying, "Get out." I don't know why.
Waverly's story begins in the late 19th century. The year is 1883. Major Thomas H. Hayes, former Inspector General for the Confederate Army, owned the property where Waverly stands today. With the location being several miles away from the busy streets of downtown Louisville and any resource for proper schooling, Hayes commissioned a schoolhouse be built on site to further the education of his daughters. It's through this new construction and the hiring of a teacher that the Waverly name is born.
Now, he hired a lady named Miss Lizzie Lee Harris for the school teacher. She had a fondness for Sir Walter Scott's Waverly novels, so she actually named the schoolhouse Waverly School. Major Thomas Hayes got to thinking about the name. He liked it so well that he named the whole property Waverly Hill. That's how it originally got the name Waverly Hill. Let's go up to 1907, when the Board of Tuberculosis Hospital was looking at this property as an ideal site for the first tuberculosis hospital. They kept that name Waverly Hill. And 1908, they started construction on a small two-story Tudor-styled hospital, which was capable of holding about 40 to 50 patients. That opened up in 1910.
By 1926, a new, more advanced facility, the best in the eastern U.S., opens as Waverly Hills Tuberculosis Sanatorium. Although Waverly was the most advanced hospital facility of its kind, many of its treatments were still seen as extreme.
By today's medical standards, absolutely bizarre. We would never in a million years think to do these things. Some of the stranger techniques would have been the removal of certain ribs in the body so that they could get into the body and kind of compress the lung so that person didn't have to use the lung anymore. That was a last effort. As many as 1 in 5 people would die with that. But again, if that's all you had to save your life, wouldn't you try it? You probably would.
There have been many rumors spread about the exact number of deaths that occurred at Waverly Hills. Some rumors put the death toll as high as 63,000. However, most researchers believe Waverly's mortality rate to be much, much lower.
But what I did in the book is I went through and I added up the records from different kinds of years, and I came up with a conservative estimate that there were at least at a minimum of 10 to 15,000 people who died right here.
And if you go by the statistics on the papers that I have, of having maybe a couple thousand people die a year, well, you know, who says it was all here? You know, you've got the whole state of, now, you know, Louisville did have the highest death rate of tuberculosis in the nation, because we live in Ohio Valley. You know, a lot of moisture stays here. But I don't think that's accurate. I know there was thousands, but I couldn't tell you for sure exactly what that number is.
Waverly was created as a place for people to live, and there were many more people who Waverly helped save their lives and save the lives of their family than anything.
One of those survivors is Mary Ferguson of Louisville. Mary spent several years as a patient at Waverly Hills beginning in the early 1940s.
I coughed a lot, and I was real thin, weighed 89 pounds, and I was about 5'5", 6. And she took me to the clinic, and they x-rayed me and said I would have to needed to go to Waverly Hills, that I had TB. I really liked it. I made friends with a lot of the women around and girls around, and then after I was there 6 months, I think I got to, that's when they said I could go outside. I could walk outside for maybe 15 minutes, and my 15 minutes usually turned into about a half hour, 45 minutes, and they'd have to send somebody looking for me. And we would meet in one of our rooms, mostly mine, and we'd play cards at night, penny, and what do you call it? Whoever's got the highest card, and you put pennies up. And one of the guys that was down there, a young man, he hadn't been there. I'd never seen him before. I'd never seen most of them before. And anyway, he wanted to come up and play cards with us. And so I said, be fine. And I gave him the room number. And he came up, and I felt real bad because I happened to be winning all his pennies that night. And we heard that he was going to be operated on the next day. He was 18 years old, and I can't remember his name because I only saw him that one time. And I wanted to give the pennies back to him. I said, here, you can have these pennies back because, I wouldn't need them. He said, well, I won't need them anymore after tomorrow. And he didn't, because he died on the operating table.
Times weren't all bad at Waverly, according to Charlie Mattingly. His father was there as a result of one of Louisville's worst natural disasters.
The stories I heard from my dad was about the time that he came up to Waverly Hills. It was in 1937. There was a flood that was in Louisville, and they lived, well, my father didn't live there. His mother's parents lived at the bottom of the hill on the other side of Dixie Highway. And he was at his mother's parents' farm helping them on the farm when the flood came through. And their house floated away, all the cattle died, they all drowned. And they made it up the hill and walked up the body chute into the building to find a dry place to stay. The stories he would tell me when he was up here is how clean the building was. It was immaculate. You could see your face in the floor. The food was the best food he ever ate in his whole life. He said the treatment of everybody here was the best he'd ever seen anybody treated. He said that the spirits were high, even though there were so many people that knew that they had a disease that they were going to die. He says every day they had people singing like in a choir. They had people making baskets. They had a party for every occasion that you could think of, just anything to keep everybody's spirits up. He said every month they would have a birthday party for anybody that had a birthday in that month. And he says that the hospital treated everyone with great respect and did a great job at consoling all the people that died up here.
Former patient Bill McGill recalls his time at Waverly as a young child.
1930 or 31. I think I was 5 years old when I went there, and I was there for 2 days, less than a year. Back in those days, my daddy and mother didn't have money to take you to the doctor, so I don't know what was wrong with me, but she took me to this clinic, and they said I had a lung trouble. So they took me out there for fresh air and stuff like that. All I had was a spot on my lung. And they said I would never be able to play with the other kids. I couldn't play ball, I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that. Outdoors, there was a swing set, and then there was a big round thing that 2, 3, 4, 5 kids could get on and go around, and it would go like this, you know. And I know I fell off one day and cut my chin, and I've still got the little scar there. But I had a good time out there. You know, I had 4 brothers at home, and my father wasn't making much money at that time. He was laid off from the railroad, and so one mouth less to feed helped them out.
Waverly closed its doors as a TB hospital in June of 1961. The epidemic was stemmed with the discovery of penicillin and other antibiotics. Those discoveries, though, were much too late for the hundreds or thousands who died. But due to Waverly's services to the community, thousands more had been saved.
I understand all of the problems that Waverly has had, and I understand all of the death and all of the despair that was up here, but I also understand that there was a lot of life up here.
Shortly thereafter, in October 1962, Waverly reopens as Woodhaven Geriatric Center, a facility designed to care for the elderly.
I have heard not too many good things about when it was a geriatrics hospital. I have talked to workers, people that worked here when it was Woodhaven, and no one that I talked to had a good thing to say about it. And a lot of it was probably because it was understaffed, like a lot of places are. Workers couldn't help it. They couldn't take care of the people the way they needed to be.
Due to reports of inappropriate patient care, Woodhaven is forced to close its doors in 1980, never to open again. After the closure of Woodhaven, the building stood abandoned for 3 years. In 1983, a developer purchased the property with hopes of opening a minimum security prison for the state of Kentucky. Due to the outcry from the locals, those plans eventually fell through. 13 years pass, and in 1996, the hospital and land are sold to Robert Alberhasky, who wanted to build the world's tallest statue of Jesus, along with a religious worship center, on the site. These plans, too, fell through due to lack of funding. Waverly stood again, abandoned, for another 5 years. In 2001, Charles and Tina Mattingly of Louisville purchased the property, and they have owned it ever since.
Oh my gosh. I actually came up here with my brother to start with because he wanted to, invest in it with us. And it just looked like a garbage dump. And it was just debris and just stuff everywhere. Refrigerators, hot water heaters, cars, tires, you just name it, it was here. It was just terrible.
It took almost the first 2 years of owning this place to get the building cleaned up and get all the environmental concerns that we had about the building addressed and taken care of. And so now we've been checked out by the Air Pollution Board, and we're deemed clean.
With all the deaths that resulted from TB combined with the many deaths that occurred during the time of Woodhaven, it's not surprising that some people believe Waverly to be haunted.
And I found out that right after I bought the place that there was a lot of interest in this building, that it might be haunted. And this was something that I didn't really know about. And so when I first came here, I was walking through the building with a camcorder, just recording the shape of the building and inside and out of the building. And then when I took and looked at the tape, I saw all kind of images on it, and I saw looked like bolts of lightning and orbs floating around and shadows moving, and I just couldn't believe everything I was seeing on this camera. And I really felt funny as I was walking through the building. I felt real eerie, like somebody's watching me the whole time. And I heard footsteps, like people were following me around the building, but I never saw anybody. And I took this film home and looked at it, and I thought, well, this is really odd. And about the same time where I just bought the place, I was contacted by the Fox Network, and they said, we heard about Waverly. And I said, you have? What'd you hear? He says, we heard it's haunted. And I says, well, that's what I'm hearing. And they said, can you send us some footage? And I said, well, I'll send you some wild footage that you won't believe. And I sent it to them, and just as soon as they got it, a week later, they were over here knocking on my door saying, can we see this place?
Stories of ghosts have been synonymous with Waverly for decades. Some people believe it to be one of the most haunted locations in America. Thousands visit Waverly every single year with hopes of having their very own encounter with the spirits who reportedly walk these very halls. Retired paranormal investigator Tom Greco has spent over 35 years researching reports of ghosts and hauntings after experiencing his own life-changing encounter with the unknown.
Waverly Hills is the most active place I've ever been in my life. This is the first time and the only time that I've been able to get validation of what I was experiencing and have that captured on the video as a response.
If you're truly showing us what you wanted to show us, and we appreciate what you did. If they make a noise, or let us see an orb in the hallway.
And within seconds, and I think we've looked at that, it was 2 seconds after that statement, we have a response to it, which is the first time that I've ever seen that myself captured on video or experienced it myself in any of the places that I have gone to.
But I got about right in here, and I saw a silhouette of a man in the doorway. So I stopped, and I said, I had a snake light around my neck, but I didn't have it on. And the moon was coming through, you know, from the outside, and I didn't really need a light on. And I said, "Who is that?" And nobody answered me. So I took my snake light, and I, you know, had it around my neck, like I said, and I clicked it on, and I held it up, shined it where I saw the man standing at, and he wasn't there.
You know, we try to tell everybody that, you know, they come in and they call them names and they provoke and this and that these ghosts were somebody's mother, daughter, sister, you know, they were a loved one. And how would they feel if somebody did that to their loved one? Usually that straightens them out.
Well, there's a difference between asking and challenging. Challenging will cost you. I've found that out. I challenged at Waverly while we were there. Needless to say, you can't play that part of the tape because of the language that I used. But after 35 years of working on this, I've always been able to sense when something's around and been able to tell people. And, you know, whether people believe that or don't believe it, it really doesn't matter to me. But the point is, I physically was grabbed and did not sense that it was going to happen. But just before that, when I got up to walk down the hall, I said, "Let's see what you could do." And I did it in a challenging way. It didn't take long for them to respond.
Let's do it.
You all right? Me? Here. Something grabbed the back of my head. I'm sorry, but excuse my French, but it scared the shit out of me. Okay. Oh, man, you want that? I don't want that. Oh, that just completely freaked me out because I was not expecting it. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I've been creeped out a lot of times in this building, and I can actually say I've been scared several times in this building.
Shirlene Edwards has been giving tours of the haunted hospital for years, sometimes with unseen guests in tow.
This is the 3rd floor, and I was on this floor doing a tour. I had gotten right here with my group of boys. Forget what high school, but it was a boys' school. And as I'm walking down the hall here, I always have the group to meet me down here by the exit sign when they're finished observing this part of the hallway. And as I'm getting my group together, my caboose is with them, and I start to walk into this hallway. When I was by myself, and it wasn't but a few seconds after I stepped in that I heard a voice on my left-hand side that just said, "Get out." It was definitely a female voice. I had nothing but guys with me. And I've heard stories, other people's also heard voices as well in this hall.
The Waverly name carries many legends, such as the belief that it was once a mental hospital, and probably the most bizarre rumor, that of a blood room where deceased patients were drained of all of their bodily fluids before being taken to their final resting place. Both are not true. However, there is one famous legend about Waverly Hills that may have roots in fact.
When we got the building, the main story that we always heard was about the nurse that hung herself up on the 5th floor in 502. And I met a man one day, his name is Joe Thornberry. He's passed away since. He actually grew up here. His father and all of his uncles worked up here. We talked, and he had came up here a few times after that, and we got to kind of know each other. And I asked him one day, I said, "Joe," I said, "you know, we hear all kinds of stories up here." I said, "You don't know what's true, what's not." And he said, "Well, if there's anything I know, I'll tell you." And I said, "Well, the main thing that we hear is about the nurse that hung herself up on the 5th floor." I said, "You know anything about that?" He hung his head down and he said, "Yes, ma'am, I do." And I said, "Well, is it true?" And he said, "Yes, ma'am, it is."
The 5th floor here is where we have the infamous 502 room. The legend behind 502 was that back in the 30s, a nurse became pregnant here out of wedlock. Now, in these days, it was frowned upon to become pregnant out of wedlock. And we have been told that she went into 502, which is actually just a washroom, and aborted the baby herself. According to legend, after that, she then came out in this hallway where we're standing, and she hung herself here. People get sick when they enter the room. A lot of them get splitting headaches. I've had people on tour before I've taken through here. They had to actually go outside and recover. So 502 is a mysterious room. What we've also found here on the 5th floor is 503. Seems to be one of the more mysterious rooms. It's this tremendous battery drain. It seems to drain everybody's batteries.
All lights if you're angry with us. You want us to leave? All lights if you want us to leave.
I'd say that's a yes.
Yeah, definitely.
My gosh, look at that.
Are you the nurse that died here?
I guess that's a yes.
Yep, I think it is.
Did you commit suicide? All lights?
No.
Did you kill your baby? All lights.
No.
I was gonna think I got TB here.
Did you get TB? All lights.
Clairvoyant Mary Lou Coy works with the paranormal researchers of Ohio Valley, also known as PROVE. On an investigation in November of 2005, Mary Lou made physical contact with the spirit that took the investigators, film crew, and Mary Lou totally by surprise.
I channeled Penny. And when you channel a spirit, the spirit comes in through you. They host within you. And Penny used my voice to verbalize her emotions or her opinions or her attitudes. And so she began to talk about who she was and that Waverly was her home, and she began to describe what things were like there, that sort of thing. She was very emotional. I mean, there was a lot of crying going on, and I'm aware that I'm channeling, so I know she's there.
It's a good thing that you're here. I'm glad I have this voice to speak.
It's okay, Penny.
It's good. It was a good place here. It was not bad. We were happy, even though the general outcome was that we wouldn't leave.
Other than her name was Penny, other than she had been in a hospital there, a young girl, I took her to be maybe 19, 20, early, you know, young girl. Evidently she died there. She had a good friend. I think she kept making reference to her friend Jean. She seemed quite happy there. I mean, obviously she was ill, but evidently, according to Penny, you know, Waverly was a nice place. I mean, apart from the fact that most people didn't get out alive, so to speak.
And those that stay here, we're not sad. We're here because this is where our home is. Don't think we haven't gone to the light, as you say, but we come back here because it's comfortable.
I understand.
We don't see it as you see it. We don't see it in a rumble and a tumble. It looks just like it always did for us. It's not like this at all, how you see it on the cameras. It's quite lovely for us.
If it makes you feel better, you kind of helped us see.
There's no markings on the walls. It's just our pictures. The children draw. There's no scribbling and mean things on the floor. It wasn't allowed. We I'm being respected our home here.
So you're not stuck here then? You choose to come back here. You choose to come
We're
here.
not stuck at all. No, we're not stuck. We can come and visit. This is our home. This is where I died.
And you know, I tell my clients a lot, especially clients that come to me with a lot of sadness or sorrow about mom or dad or brother, sister, whomever that may have died. I always ask them this question. I said, can you ever remember being dead? There's not a single person that can ever remember being dead. And so I tell them, so what does that tell you? Maybe we don't really die. We may change forms. We may change dimensions. So you have to believe that spiritual entities are real.
Another well-known legend of Waverly Hills is that of the tunnel, or sometimes referred to as the body chute. Now, this 500-foot tunnel that I just walked out of was originally used as part of the original heating system at Waverly Hills. A boiler located at the bottom of the hill sent steam through steam pipes into the hospital to help with the heating during the cold winter months. It was also used as a way to transport supplies in and out of the hospital facility as well. It wasn't until later in the tuberculosis years that the death toll began to rise so high that hospital staff felt it would be a better, discreet way to remove the corpses from the hospital via this tunnel down to a makeshift morgue at the bottom of the hill. I went on an investigation of this tunnel with the paranormal researchers of Ohio Valley in November of 2005, and this is what we found.
My equilibrium is really off. So this is where they took the bodies out of Waverly down to the hearses.
Yeah, you can see where they pulled them along and where you walk down the steps.
And you've got a person dying every hour. I guess it would be a little depressing to have to watch the bodies come.
Mary Lou's husband, Bubba Coy, is also a member of Prove and a sensitive. He helps the group in psychic interpretations of their investigation sites.
I can feel where somebody's done ceremonial things, but it's nothing that's tied to Waverly itself. Satanic stuff going on. There's a real sad feeling, but I'm assuming it's because of just the job of having to shoot their friends down the hole here. But I don't feel any activity or anything.
Pictures and videos of unexplained phenomena continue to be captured by visitors, paranormal researchers, and Waverly's own security cameras. Is it truly haunted? That's really up to you to decide. Charlie and Tina Mattingly hope that through donations and tour revenues, they can someday resurrect this historic site.
We're just hoping that somebody that, you know, that has money, they'll see the potential that we see in the building and want to help us save it. We finally decided on, we thought it would be good as a bed and breakfast. You know, that way everyone can always come. It'd be open to the public. We've had people approach us for condos and apartments, but we just said, no, that's not what it should be. That belongs to those people then, and they live there, and then the public couldn't come. And there's so many people that want to come and see it. So we thought it should be something, you know, maybe a museum in the building, you know, the bed and breakfast, gift shops, you know, the whole first floor maybe for things like that, and then the second and third floor like for the bed and breakfast. And I'd like to see maybe the fourth floor left the way it is, you know, and people could go on ghost hunts and things like that.
During the course of this program, we've done our best to try to give you a small glimpse into the past history as well as the paranormal background of Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Now, whether or not you believe in ghosts and the first-hand accounts you've seen here tonight, that's up to you. But I think we can all agree that Waverly Hills Sanatorium is one of Louisville's historic gems, and a gem that deserves to be saved. Charlie and Tina Manley take every cent they make off the tours, overnight stays, and special events here, and put that money right back into the restoration of this building. They also donate several times a year to local charities in and around the Louisville area. If you would like your chance to brush against the unknown, you can go online to book your reservation for a tour or overnight stay. The web address is therealwaverlyhills.com, or call the telephone number listed on your screen. Until next time, I'm Chris McGill. Thanks for watching.